April 7th, 2003. We're at the Peabody Public Library, and we are interviewing Michael R. Hayes. I'm Janet Skank, the director of the Peabody Public Library. Mike was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. He had the rank of Master Sergeant E7, and he served in a whole lot of places. In the United States, at different Air Force bases, in Korea, and in Puerto Rico. Okay, why don't we get started? Mike, I have started all of these interviews by asking if you had joined, or were you in, or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
You enlisted.
Right.
Okay, what made you enlist?
Well, I was...
Why, not made?
I had been living in Florida for 2 years after getting out of International Business College, and I lost my job, and I had been in the Air Force Reserve and been in the Air National Guard, and I thought that the Air Force was the place for me, so I joined.
Okay. Do you remember what it was like when you first joined? Your boot camp training?
Yes, that was probably the first week was rather terrifying. The TIs, the training instructors, were we thought they were the toughest guys in the world, and they really they keep a rough hand on you. But by the time it was over, I discovered one of them was just a farm boy from Minnesota, and he was just fine when he wasn't chewing you out.
Okay. We said you served mostly during the Vietnam War. Do you want to explain again where you went, where you were stationed?
Okay. After basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, I was sent to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, and I have been a weatherman for my entire career. I started, I was about 9 months at Barksdale, and then I received orders to go to Dreux Air Force Base in France. And so in August of 1959, I departed for Dreux.
Were you in Weatherman at this point? Had they given you that
Yes.
training? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I had received my initial training in the Air Guard, 1954 to 56, and luckily for me, I was able to get into the weather slot with the Air Force.
Okay. So we got you to Dreux in France.
Right.
Okay, and where'd you go from there?
Okay, that was supposed to be a 3-year tour, and after we had been there a year and a half, in which my wife came over and we married in France, but we were going to have to move because Dreux was closing, and they offered me the chance to either go to another base in France or go home. And they told me Homestead Air Force Base was available, and so I jumped on that. So I came home in April of 1961, and then we went to Homestead for 3 years.
Okay. Did you see any combat?
No, no, no. That was no.
Okay. You have told me, though, but previous to this, about you were in the service during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, that was probably the most exciting time of our life. I was working at the weather station at that time, and
where were you stationed there?
At Homestead Air Force Base,
okay.
yeah, just south of, about 30 miles south of Miami. And this was actually was the focal point where we had several hundred airplanes at the base at that time, and of course it was deadly serious. And we were working 12 hours on and 12 hours off through that Cuban Missile Crisis, and but nobody minded.
And what were you? How were you involved then with the weather and all of that?
Yes, right.
What things did you do?
I was a weather observer at that time.
Okay.
And it involved, of course, watching the weather, the active weather, and then we had to we'd plot weather maps and help prepare slides for briefings and things like this.
A little bit about life in the military. You said your wife came to France and you were married in France?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, we had dated the 30 days that I was home before I went to France, and after I got to France, I decided I really missed her. So I asked her to marry me, and surprisingly she said yes.
Long distance?
Yeah, I wrote her a letter.
You wrote her a letter?
Yeah.
And where is, your wife is Julie, and where is she from?
She's from my hometown in North Manchester.
Okay. While you were in the service, any kind of things like you might have done for good luck?
Well, no, I never thought of myself as superstitious or anything like that.
How about the food? Since you were in so many bases,
I was generally satisfied with the food wherever we were at.
And did Julia get to travel with you after you were married?
Yeah, in France, we took one nice long leave when we went out through eastern France and into Germany. Went to Munich. We were there for the Oktoberfest, which was one of the most interesting and exciting things that occurred to us. And then after the Oktoberfest, we went on down to Garmisch-Partenkirchen, I believe was the name of the place, which was the Armed Forces Recreation Center. And we stayed down there. We went up and toured the Eagle's Nest, which was Hitler's private house. And then we came back through Switzerland and back to Drew. So that was our biggest trip. Otherwise, we just took trips around France.
And did she get to go to Korea when you were in Korea? Did
No.
she get to go there?
No.
She had to come back here to the States.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about, or is there anything else about the time you served either off the shores of the United States or during any particular events that, other than the Cuban?
Well, yeah. In France, we left in, I believe it was April of '61, and 3 months later the Berlin Wall was built, and they immediately reopened the bases in France.
Really?
So if we had been able to foretell the future, we would have still been there.
Still been in France.
But as it was, it didn't work out that way. So yeah, that was a rather exciting time. Being in France was interesting just because General de Gaulle was the president of France, and it was just interesting watching him rule.
Really? Did you? Was he someone you admired or someone you criticized or?
Oh, I'd say I admired him. I think he was pretty arrogant, but he knew how to run the country, and he was popular, and I thought generally he was okay, except he wanted to kick all the Americans out of France.
Well, he got you out.
He got me out.
Okay, let's talk about then, if you if you have any, unless you have something more to add to that, when your service ended. From the dates you've given me, you were a career service person then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you remember the day that you left the service?
Well, yeah, sort of, 31st of May, my last day. Actually, I don't think it was unusual. We had cleaned up our house. We had lived on base at Grissom Air Force Base, and I was ready. I'd had my 20 years in, and that 20 years actually included probably about 3 months of Air National Guard, which is one reason it looks like it's short of 20 years. But
Oh, well, okay.
But,
I didn't look at the months.
but yeah, I was in the Air Guard for over 2 years. So, but no, I don't remember anything terribly unusual about it. It was, it's a little scary when you're something you've been doing for 20 years and you get out, but.
How did the service then affect you in your future career? You said you'd always been in the weather field.
Yeah. Well, it was a big help, because the last couple months while I was at Grissom, I had applied to a civil service to the National Weather Service, and at that time you had to fill out your application, send in your records, and they sent me a GS9 rating, and so when we got home that summer, I went up to the Fort Wayne National Weather Service office, and I had my applications in, and I went in, and they said, well, they had an opening there, and I just happened to meet the guy that was working, had gone through weather school with me at Chanute, and he put in a good word with the boss, and they hired me. So it was July 5th or something like that of 1978, I went to work with the National Weather Service. So I had my 30-day vacation.
Yes, your 30-day vacation. That's good. Okay, is there anything else you want to add, Mike?
Oh, I guess that one thing I was rather proud that we did was I had 6 years of that time, would have been from 1970 through 76, that I was actually working in the solar field rather than the weather field. And the 3 years I spent at Colorado Springs and Cheyenne Mountain, we were trying to forecast solar flares on the sun. And if you think weather forecasting is tough, this was much worse.
Really?
Because I doubt if we did very good. And then after 3 years there, when I went to Ramey, Puerto Rico, I was in the solar observatory, and there we watched the sun constantly during the daylight, and during that time we were supporting the Skylab space mission, and so
That's fascinating.
so that was an exciting time.
Did you ever get to predict the solar eruptions or solar flares?
Yeah, I hit a few, but more often than not, you would think that this region is coming around the edge of the sun and it's going to be hot, and so you'd start raising the probabilities, and nothing would happen.
So you were, it would have been research then more than anything else that you were in.
Well, sort of, although the problem, the solar, let's see, how do I want to say this? An eruption on the sun can cause a geomagnetic storm on the Earth if it's large enough, and when that happens, it interrupts radio communications.
Okay.
And so the Air Force was terribly worried about, they needed to know when these things are going to happen. and so that they can have their backup communications and everything. And so it was a rather exciting time, and working in Cheyenne Mountain is an incredible experience you'd never forget, because you're a half mile inside the mountain.
Really? Is that where the base is? I mean, everybody is stationed there?
Yep, everybody is. You go in, the doors slam shut, and you're in there. And
Wow.
yes, it was interesting.
And you said you were supporting the Skylab?
Right, the Skylab was in our first orbital space station, and we had to warn them if a region was going to be hot, or we had to warn them that solar flares might be a
Okay, so it's
possibility.
part of your process of trying to predict the solar flares then?
Right.
You're supporting the Skylab.
Mm-hmm.
How do those solar flares, how did they affect the Skylab? I mean, why was that a concern to them?
Well, that intense radiation that's coming down from those, they didn't know for sure how it would affect them, but that they always said that if an astronaut were outside the spaceship, it would kill him.
Mm.
So.
I see. Hey, do you have anything else you want to add, Mike?
No, I just had I had 22 years with the National Weather Service, and then I
That's
finally.
after you left the service?
Right, after that. And at that point, I've retired.
Well, if you have nothing else to add then we'd like to thank you for doing this.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's a very important project, and we're just so happy that you were able to participate.
Thank you.